Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming through. We know that on a Saturday morning, most of you would have been doing your chores at home, doing things that make you relax. And the fact that you're here makes us grateful. So thank you very much for coming through. I think it's important that we set the context why we thought it was important for us and the Rights Associate to do this event this morning. And the context is that having a chairman who is an author makes it impossible for you to ignore authors in the first place. But to have a chairman who also likes poetry and believes that it conveys a message makes it even more difficult to ignore it. But we cannot ignore the fact that Madiba believed that poetry, arts were the things that gave the voice to the struggle. So on this occasion, when we're marking the first anniversary of Madiba's passing, we thought it important for us to host this event. We're hoping to host this as an annual event where we would be able to have you annually to mark this anniversary. Thought I should also quote Madiba, reflecting on the power of the arts, dance, literature, song, etc., and what he thought about them. And I quote Madiba saying, "During the worst years of repression, when all avenues of legitimate protest were closed by emergency legislation, it was the arts that articulated the plight and the democratic aspirations of our people. This affirmation was demonstrated through drama, dance, literature, song, film, paintings, and sculpture that defied the silence that apartheid sought to impose." And I think this captures the essence of why we're here, because we believe that you remain a critical voice in terms of our democratization project. And we hope that as we grow into going towards our 21st anniversary as a democratic country, you will continue to be that voice. So at this point, I'd like to again thank the Rights Associate, especially Ntate Rax Morakabe for always for always agreeing. And when we called him, he said, "No, sure, you need not worry. This will happen." But to thank all of you for sacrificing your weekend to be with us today. So at this point, I'd like to call on someone who made sure to be here, even though she's rushing because she then has to fly out. I'm going to call on Philippa de Villiers to come and recite a poem for us.
This poem was commissioned by the Royal Commonwealth Society just over a year ago. They asked me to reflect on Team Commonwealth's goals, which were basically about teamwork, and also on the contribution of the recently passed son of the Commonwealth. They just appropriated Madiba. So I had to work through that in my process. But I just wanted to say this poem came about because of other people as well. And I guess for me, this whole day represents thinking about other people and what they contribute to our achievements. And I'd like to thank my family, my son and my partner who are here today. Courage, it takes more. It takes more than breath to be alive, more than blood to find your line, more than a hand to throw a stone. It takes a heart beaten into bricks and built into a house that humanity calls a home. The house is in the street, and the street lies on the land, a land of corpses and speeches, a land of lies. The lies that we tell to keep the best for our own family, country, God, whatever we imagine is our home. The best of us are rivers who give themselves to oceans, rivers who throw themselves over cliffs into oceans, Rivers who never look back, never regret what they've given, and the more they give, the more flows out. Will you, won't you walk behind Mandela? Follow his feet along Justice Street. Won't you, will you build your heart into a home for all humanity? He was not alone. A million hands held him up. Colossus. And there is no house without mortar, no wall without foundation, no shelter without roof, no Mandela without Mbeki, Sisulu, Dadu, no Biko without Ngoyi, Sobukwe without Goldberg, no Fisher without Slovo, without First. And will you walk behind them and shout freedom through your thirst? Spend your breath for justice, to freedom or to death. It takes more love than you think you have, but you are a river. Heroes are heroes because we make them heroes. Mutu, Kimutu, Kabatu, Babang. River, ocean falling, falling into the sun. And when all languages are forgotten and this day of life is done, only when we come together can we say that we have won, that you and I are one. One love, one heart, one. Happy Madiba Day. Thank you.
And thanks again, Philippa, for coming through. I know that you have to rush. So I'd like to call the person who's hosting us today. This event is actually hosted by Professor Njabulo Ndebele, who is the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And I'd like to ask him to please come and make his remarks.
Good morning to all of you, and I think it's best for me not to be behind that thing that Silo wishes to speak from. And so it's better to rhyme here than from there. It's such a delight to welcome you to the foundation this morning. And it's wonderful to look around and see some very old friends that we have been with. That when I look at them, I remember the old Koso days. But it's also wonderful to see new faces, some very young ones just in front here, which really shows the passage of time and the fact that there was mention in the last poem of rivers, and the river of life keeps flowing. And I think there was a line about the rivers joining the ocean and everything. And I think that we are here, we are all part of the river of life. Some of the water is well ahead, and some water is still coming down from the mist, somewhere where the rivers begin, and it goes down out of the mountains and begins to flow. I have a good sense of this, having spent a lot of time in Lesotho, where some of the rivers begin, and the Orange in particular goes all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. So here are the mists coming down, and there's us here just about to join the ocean. And in between, there's a lot of us flowing along with life. And thank you for being here this morning to become part of the river of life that was given new energy with the passing away of Madiba. He has clearly gone into the ocean now to be an ancestor there. And we are all here to remember that and to commemorate it. And in doing so, we are all a part of the world to mark the passing of this remarkable human being. Whichever way you look at, I once started an article about him saying that this colossus, many of the people you try to find, you find weaknesses and you identify the weaknesses. But even the weaknesses make him stronger, difficult to assail, because he's such a balanced person. Kathy spoke at the wreath laying yesterday and read out a list of the contradictions between him. Then the one that in him, the one that I remember most is this man who of democracy on the one hand, and on the other, an autocrat, all the same. And he went on to other contradictions, but these contradictions speak to the complexity of the person, and that cannot be pinned down to single attributes. In a sense, he personifies everything. That is why it is so difficult to pin him down. And in a sense, it makes it difficult even to explain him, because there can be no single explanation. And I guess that is the measure of the person that we are remembering today, that he is not susceptible to easy explanations. That each time you go back to his work, you find something new, and that is as it should be. Now, I thought a little bit about Madiba, and I asked Silo this morning, is there anything, what fiction did Madiba read? What poems did he read? Van said that they did a cataloging. It's difficult to pin it down, but they cataloged some of his library, wherever it is, and then to go back to historical documents. He says that they found very little in the documentation that shows a consistent reading of fiction and poems and so on. But that's the sort of modern thing. And going on with that is there would have been a lot of books that he had to read as part of his curriculum. Maybe that has something to do also with the popularity of drama on Robben Island. Certainly it is known that they performed some Greek plays. They also read a lot of Shakespeare and performed some Shakespeare. But it is also known that he appreciated the oral tradition. So from the point of view of storytelling and poetry of that kind, he appreciated it very deeply. So, but what also is known is that he read a lot of non-fiction, so the form of biographies and of, as you would expect, if you see the exhibition, you will see, if I remember, Silo, there's something about the John Foster's biography. So he liked to read about his enemies as well. So that in a sense, as he reads about the enemies transform from being enemies into human beings, because then you see the complexity even in the person that cause you political problems. But then, in a sense, all of us are capable of causing political problems. But clearly his methodology was to try and understand, gain as full an understanding as possible. So that is the kind of person that we are remembering today as writers, poets, writers of fiction, writers of non-fiction, reciters of poetry, singers of songs and music. That is what we are doing today. And we hope, as Silo said, that this is something that we will be able to do regularly, and perhaps be able to plan more ahead of time in future, and think of all possible things that would make it a worthwhile occasion for us to be here. So we're looking forward to the readings, and welcome to the foundation. I'm the one thing I'm performing on a sort of formal sense. Welcome to the foundation, and thank you for being here. And we are looking forward to a really affirming experience this morning, and all of us being part of this spirit and this river that I talked about earlier on. So thank you very much, and let's enjoy the offerings that we are going to receive from among ourselves this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Prof reminded us that he used the going back to the word of the river and the sea and hope. And then he called Madiba, he's now an ancestor. And I want to remind you of what Bishop Mpumlwana said yesterday, that Madiba is now an ancestor of hope, because that's the thing that Madiba carried a lot of. He wrote a letter in 1969 to his daughters, and in that letter he reflected about how difficult it was not having them, and how sad they must be. But then he said, as part of the letter, he said, I hope you know that I'm well, and that I hope that you remember that I carry hope and strength. And that was that one day I will spend the rest of my life with you. This is 1969. Unbeknown to him that he still had about 20 more years to go in prison. So we have no reason not to hope, in other words. I'd like to, at this point, call on Berita to give us a music item. And I thought I should remind you of what Madiba thinks of African music. I quote him when he says, African music is something that goes straight to your heart, and it tells the story of your own life, your living conditions, and your aspirations. And I know that Berita is going to deliver precisely.
This morning I was thinking what I was going to play, and I couldn't quite think what would fit, because it was one of my dreams to play for Utata Madiba. This song that I'm going to play first is a Xhosa song. It's a song called Sugundi Klesha, and the chorus is Sugundi Klesha, ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam, ixesha libekwe nguThixo, lixesha lam elo. And it's in accordance to what you're saying. Translated, that means, don't rush me, let me dance in the time that God has said I must dance. And as I was thinking about this morning, I thought to myself, I'm sure in the many years that Utata Madiba was fighting for our country, I'm sure that God chose him. And I'm sure that God told him, in Xhosa, anzuxhesha mntanam, wawuxhensa ngexesha endithe mawuxhense ngalo, which would mean that God told Madiba that, I know that you want this dream. You want South Africa to be free. You want South Africa to be a rainbow nation. But it will take time, and it will happen. So this is the song, Sugundi Klesha. Sugundi Klesha, ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina. Sugundi Klesha, ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam, ixesha libekwe nguThixo, lixesha lam elo. Sugundi Klesha, ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina. Sugundi Klesha, ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam, ixesha libekwe nguThixo, lixesha lam elo. Jonga isihlangu zami, sithende zinamasa, ujonge nesiqu sami, umzimba uxhwalekile. Ndlelingayo na uyazibonela ndihleli kabuhlungu apho ndihamba khona uthando ndilandela ndijonga ngaphinda hey sithunzidilika ay sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam ixesha libekwe nguThixo ixesha lam elo sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam ixesha libekwe nguThixo elo ixesha lam elo wabadala majala akho kuwasinyani sukulila yeah, yeah, hey. All my life I've had to fight and I won't let nobody take my dreams away. Take my dreams away, I know. Take my dreams away. Disa nem chenim na. Sudipay, ndakenzanga eshalam na. Sudipay, ndakenzanga eshalam. Ikashalima wakuti oh. Ikashalam hello. Let me tell you something. In Xhosa, there's a dance called Umxhenso. So usually I sing this song, when I go Sudipay. Ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam. So can I see your hands up when I know it's gonna be confusing, but just put them up and keep moving them like that, and I'm sure someone's gonna be doing it right in the crowd. Are you ready? 1, 2. Sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam ixesha libekwe nguThixo hello 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 ixesha lam hello. You look so beautiful. Sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam ixesha libekwe nguThixo hello 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 ixesha lam hello. One last time, I see people doing it right at the back. Sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam mina sudixesha ndawuxhensa ngexesha lam ixesha libekwe nguThixo Oh, hello, hello. Shalom, hello. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to play you one last song. This is a song called Sophinda Sidibane, which means we'll meet again. And it's a song about the death of a loved one. It says, Tandaza, Sophinda Sidibane. And there's a line in the song that says, Isigqibo senziwa nguThixo, which again goes to say that God is the one that makes the decisions. And for us to be here, for us to be rejoicing, God did choose Utata Madiba to be a part of us. So I hope you enjoy the song. Delikando undiwele mehlo akayiboni likanana wasishiya ngesiqu singalindelanga singozakhe emva kwakhe isingxengxezi sesothando kuphela isigqibo sakhe noThixo ndisivumile nyembezi zodwa izezothando thandaza mphefumlo wam siphinde sidibane thandaza mphefumlo wam siphinde sidibane uwe Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, Yahweh. Oloncumo lwakhe lohlala luhlele enhliziyweni yami, isibane sakhe sohlala siqaqamba, isingxengxezi sesothando kuphela isigqibo sakhe noThixo ndisivumile nyembezi zodwa izezothando thandaza mphefumlo wam siphinde sidibane thandaza mphefumlo wam uwe Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, uwe Yahweh, Yahweh. Wena uzohlala uhlele enhliziyweni yami, wena uzohlala uhlele enhliziyweni yami, Madiba wohlala ehlele enhliziyweni zethu, Madiba wohlala ehlele enhliziyweni zethu, Madiba wohlala ehlele enhliziyweni zethu, Madiba wohlale lenhlizweni zethu. Uweya weya, uweya weya oh. Tandaza, tandaza mphefumulo wami. Siphinde sidibane I'm happy for the opportunities that we have as young people, and I write a lot of my music for Africans, for young Africans that I can see. So this is a song called Phakama Africa, which means rise Africa. And when I say Phakama Africa, I'd like to see your fists up high. And hopefully by the end of the song, you'll be singing along with me. Yes, you can clap along. Phakama Africa, Phakama, Phakama, Phakama Africa. Ooh. Ooh. Phakama Africa, Phakama, Phakama, Phakama Africa. Ooh. Too many times you've been victimized and utilized. They've taken your riches away, filled you with poverty and diseases. They say you're not worth enough. Jesus, how good to see ya, Lila. Masiva, manenzada. Wonkumuntu. Phakama Africa. Phakama, Phakama, Phakama Africa. Ooh. Ooh. Phakama Africa. Phakama, Phakama, Phakama Africa. Ooh. Ooh. Too many times you've been victimized and utilized. They've taken your riches away, filled you with poverty and diseases. They say you're not worth enough. Jesus, how good to see ya, Lila. Masiva, manenzada. Everybody. Phakama Africa. Phakama, Phakama, Phakama Africa. Ooh. Ooh. Phakama Africa. Phakama, Phakama, Phakama Africa. Ooh. Together we must rise. Together we must fight. Together, together. Phakama Africa. Phakama. One last time. Phakama Africa. Phakama. Hey. Phakama Africa. Phakama. Phakama. Phakama Africa. Long live the spirit of Nelson Mandela. Long live. Thank you so much.
I'd like to, at this point, call on the Art of Excellence Benoni campus to come forward and give us a performance.
The play is called Mything Mandela. This is a very short extract from it, about 6 minutes. We hope you enjoy it. And next year we're trying to travel the provinces, the National Arts Festival, and possibly New York and other centers. So I hand you over to the cast and crew of Mything Mandela. Catch us on Facebook, and thank you very much for being here. Enjoy.
Mr. Njabulo, as we celebrating 20 years of democracy, you still think that Africa is an unsafe place?
Yes, of course not. South Africa is indeed a very safe place. As you can see, we have fought hard for our freedom, and 80% of the people are happy. Oh, because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like we've got democracy. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like freedom is for me. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like we've got democracy. Because I'm happy, happy, happy. Dum dum dum. Tata Madiba, Tata Madiba, Tata Madiba. Tum tum tutul, tum tum tutul, tum tum tutul.
5 December 2013. The world lost an icon. Rest in peace, Tata Madiba.
Tata Madiba, Tata Madiba, Tata Madiba.
Rest in peace, Baba Wesize. Rest in peace.
Tata Madiba, 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 Tata Madiba. I'm going to read 3 poems. One is from myself, the other from Professor Chris Mann. He's in Grahamstown. He couldn't make it today, but he requested if there is time for us to read this poem. And the other is from my sister, Dr. Wangui Wagoro, who's just lost a sister, and I think Elia, her father, and she's not very well herself. I think this cancer, somebody needs to do something about it. I'll start with my poem called Our Epitome. It's not about Mandela. It was written long ago, even before 94. Once you were a leader, many times before
your voice was that of us all. You were our hearts and our eyes. You were lionized by old and young, countryman and foreigner. Once you were us. Now you are like a wounded lion. Your limpy and unsure walk is that of a horse ravaged by wild dogs. Your once brave face filled with grimaces of pain below the seemingly happy surface. Not many of us now hanker for your voice anymore. Few among us remember the good you did. Our memories of you are that of long forgotten dinosaurs. Posterity's knowledge of you will be like a once rich garden unplowed for centuries. Thank you. I'm happy I didn't write it during this time, because I'm sure there will be comments about commentary on what's happening today. Thank you. Mandela said by Chris Mann, I stood among a crowd of tourists from abroad and stared into his past. A cage of bricks and bars, as gloomy as and as cramped as racial bias in the mind. And in that narrow tomb, a bench, a gleam of bowl, a stone-cold strip of floor. I could not hear the clang shook from a gate of steel that bigotry kept locked, nor see a gaunt-faced man fold up each dawn for years, the mat on which he had dreamt. Instead, far off I heard the cheering of the world when he, the era's Lazarus, walked out into the sun. Around that unlocked gate, that legacy's stark shrine, the cameras flashed applause. And the last one, it's a bit longish. I won't read all of it. From our sister Wangui. For Madiba, walking the land with giants. In the lasting, resounding days of your distant footfall, we always remember with joy that you walked with us, for us, standing tall, like the acacia tree in my mother's yards, yet rooted deep like the baobab, steeped in freedom. Thank you.
So remember that old man who with the kids were threatened about. I'm going to ask him to just say something before I call the last person to the stage.
When you mentioned Don Matera, I can't resist just quoting one stanza from one of his poems. Where was I that I might emerge from the burning spirit to call on an aggrieved people towards a rebirth and insurrection against these nocturnal beasts who guard our dreams and command our poems to kneel before their guns.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. I'd like to now call on the host of this of today's event, the man who has now said I should make it possible that it should happen every year. So if because he pays my salary, I will make sure that it happens every year. Professor Njabulo Ndebele.
I'd just like to thank you all for the making this morning such a reflective morning, a very inspiring morning from the different offerings that we had the honor to hear this morning. And I just also wanted to reflect that on a sort of light note, when Pitika stood up to come and say something at the end, I saw something that I've always known about him, just boundless energy. And those of us who have known him for a long time, we know where it all comes from. When the murky pasts that none of us I would be willing to talk about now. But Rax also, this morning, we're coming up to come and join you here and start the proceedings going. I saw Maureen come down and they both met and they said to each other something that startled me. Rax said to Maureen, "Hi, Madoda." So, and she said, "Hi, Madoda." So I said, there's nothing that looks like Madoda in Maureen. There's no, but it turns out that there's a sort of personal story to the name that they call each other Madoda. And it speaks to what Rax said earlier on, and he said, "Hello, Comrade President." Now, Rax is the only one that I accept that he calls me comrade and I call him Congrade, because it has a long personal history. It was not too long ago, last April, I delivered an address at the African Literature Association, in which I pondered on the different identities that I have had. And one of those I was not so sure of anymore was the one of comrade, because there are a lot of people that I'm not sure that I should ever have been their comrades before. But now there's an exception to this one, because there's a sort of a personal relationship which reminds one that some of the difficulties of transition is that you become aware of a disconnect between your subjectivity and the external reality that has changed. And you don't know whether you have changed or it has changed or it's the other way around, and you're wondering exactly how to connect. But going back to the different contradictions in Madiba's life, certainly I can't ever say that I was never a comrade, because it will always be there. But I have a critical relationship with that identity that has developed over time. And so while I can never say never, but I retain the right to be critical of any of the identities I've ever had. And they remain with me. They will never go away out of my consciousness. But the drama inside of me continues all the time. And I think that just the offerings that were made today at a higher level should remind us that the drama is always happening inside of ourselves, and that it's not the first time that people find themselves in this condition. In the 1960s and particularly in the 70s and 80s, novels such as The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born were written. And those novels carry the disappointment that we are experiencing in South Africa, the latest of the African countries to become free, one of the youngest at least. So that we are not new in the world to be in that situation. But the profound significance of our particular experience is that there was a poem, I think I caught the tail end of it. We are rowing our boat. We are the ones rowing this boat. It's no longer someone else rowing a boat that we want to topple. We are in this boat, and we have to keep the boat rowing. And in that boat, we learn that democracy that we voted for in 1994 is a precious thing to have. But what we have learned in the last couple of years is that that democracy can also be rowed in the wrong direction. But we are in that boat. So we have to get the direction right again. And it's no longer them out there, it's us inside. We are the ones who are the focus of our own attention. And we like what we will see, and sometimes we won't like what we see, but we have to confront it. And I pick up, I learn from the offerings this morning, from the youngest ones, who are they? The Art Excellence Benoni campus young people who gave me the reality for the first time. This is a rare experience of young people creatively holding a critical stance towards their own society. They are so young, and they are seeing much clearer than some of us were at their own age, that something is wrong in the environment in which they are a participant, and the boldness and the sophistication with which they critique it tells me that we have a great future, ahead of us, and that doing so in the presence of the oldest among us, Pitika, Andres, Frank, and others in here, who have lived this life for more than 60 years now. There is an intergenerational conversation that took place today that is so precious, and that continues in a profound way possible the legacy of Madiba, which the Center of Memory was mandated by him to keep alive through the dialogues that take place. But what I learned from today is that the dialogues are happening in all of us all the time. And what we have done today is to reaffirm, to note that insight and to reaffirm it in the manner that we have shared our different offerings. So I do want to thank you profoundly for your presence, those who gave us and those who listened and received. We are all participants in this. Thank you, Rax. Always, comrade. Always, you are there. You are there all the time to work for the artists. And thank you to Sillo as well for the wonderful work that you are doing at the foundation. Lastly, I'd like to observe that many of the poems and the play and the dramas and so on that we saw today are still not read in our schools, are still not heard in our schools, are not performed in our schools. That speaks to the profound problem that we have, that the things that really matter to us are still not out there in this boat that we are rowing. And we hear about them, but they are not in there. And so we still have the big fight ahead of us to as we say, if we are the focus of our own attention, we must find a way of making that focus on ourselves as pervasive as possible in the whole society, because that is how it should be. So we still have to put on with it. So thank you very much. See you next year when we come back again. Thank you.
I call on someone who I had to redeem myself, as he says, that I have a very tattered image that needed to be redeemed because I hadn't organized a thing for poets at the foundation for a year. So 12 months later, we're back here. Thanks also to him that he asked me that we should do this thing. Professor Pitikantuli is one of our best poets in this country, and I'd like to invite him to. I hope I have redeemed myself by organizing this thing today. Prof.
Awungezuzeka uzakwalwa ngumfazi inkomo ziyathengwa utiko loshe. So I wrote a poem specifically for today, and old age captures us, and I forgot it. So now what I'm going to do then is to improvise. And for some of you who were not there yesterday, I'd like to tell you just a very short story. I read a poem. I felt so good that I read that poem. After I finished, there was so much noise. When the next poet was called, people could not kind of keep quiet. And the MC was saying, please give another poet a chance. People wouldn't. 11-year-old girl came and took the mic and said, if you don't keep quiet, I'll bring back that old man. So there was dead silence, eh? So you are warned, eh? There's one thing I remember mostly about Madiba was that Madiba was always a man full of laughter. How do you celebrate actually his laughter? I'm going to do 3 short things joined actually together of what we used to do during the free Nelson Mandela campaigns when we were in exiles with the Eugene Skiffs that are there and backed up by the Frank Menkes who were up on the home in the front line. One of the short poems is called Generally Speaking. Generally speaking, we cannot salute General de Gaulle. He packed and left Africa. General Eisenhower, we sent him packing. Churchill, we bowed him out. As for Spinola of Portugal, he lost his generalship down in the African bush. As for the founders of their barracks, General Botha, General Smuts, General Herzog, it is time for us to take cover. For generally speaking, the best of the generals is a general uprising. Those were the days then. In my country, they jail you for what they think you think. My uncles once said they'll implant a microchip in your brain to flash your thoughts on John Foster Square. By day, I got my dreams. By night, I got my dreams. By day, I got my tongue. They always ask me why I've got such a long tongue. What with the system stretching it every day, looking for words under it. That's what happened. And then we were not very respectful, of course. We like adverts, we like economic liberation. Eh? We said BP, black people. BP, be prepared. BP, best petrol to throw at the silencers of our dreams. In their advertisement, they say, go well, go shell. In my country, we say, throw well, throw shell. Right. Okay. Because of my long mouth and because of my poetry, I like poetry, see? You know, poets are very terrible people. They are predators, eh? They are policemen. They arrest words and sentence them to tell different stories, right? Now, when my father died in 1990, Mandela was out, everybody was out. Me and my sons were offloaded from an aeroplane because Jan Smuts Airport was not ready to receive me. Everybody was actually in there. They were not allowed to receive me. I was wondering as to whether why, this is. I discovered this only a month ago, why. Whenever P.W. Botha went over to Europe, he'll sell apartheid, and then they'll put in a snippet of a poem that I like after his speech. So when they started debriefing as to whether what was happening, the security would always, I had the last word. So they were not yet ready. The death squads were still roaming. I'll conclude with that piece. When people were killed everywhere else, massacres, and we pray to God and God doesn't seem to be listening, we decided that we are going to break diplomatic relations with God. But nonetheless, we needed to pray. So I chose that I'm going to pray to one person only, the Prime Minister, P.W. Botha. Now, here it goes. P.W. Botha is my shepherd, I am in want. He maketh me to lie down in street corners. He disturbs my soul for apartheid's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valleys and shadows of inflation, I anticipate no recovery, for he is against me. He prepareth a reduction in my salary. He increases my VAT. My expenses runneth over. Surely unemployment and uprising shall follow him all the days of his administration. I shall carry my AK-47 forever and ever. Ratata.
I'd like to, at this point, I don't know if they are related. And I am sure they are. The last time I checked. Antoinette Ntuli to come and also deliver a poem.
So it's dedicated to Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, and Romaine Brisbane, and it's called The Last Day. Wrongfully convicted, they say I'm guilty. Every pore in my body denies. Now remain 23 hours and 59 minutes. I dissect each and every second, take it, touch it, roll it around on my tongue of memory and hope, unsure if I wish to prolong or devour it. All I carry with me are these few small words. These final seconds, their monstrous heaviness belies their featherweight. 19 hours, 51 minutes. I could cash in a few for a steaming cup of creamy hot chocolate and scented Italian grapes. But would that leave me enough to buy a glass of dawn-drenched, dew-dusted air, kissed by the rays of the rising sun? 12 hours, 5 seconds. Perhaps I should dig deep in my purse of letters and excavate the words to catch a drop of thunder packed with the tender touch of rain to wear upon my back for these last few hours. Or maybe I could purchase a dancing moonbeam flitting across the languorous swell of the Mediterranean Sea to soothe my burning eyelids. This tiny packet of words have cost a fortune. 7 hours, 19 minutes, and 3 seconds only remain. I claw through the bowels of my purse, my fingers raw and bleeding, as they try to extract the exact words, to capture early morning pansy smiles, the sweet scent of lakeside loving lilies, a muddy farmyard, the piercing cry of a cracked-wing curlew, and the midday caress of young chestnut leaves unfurling in a fresh spring breeze. 1 hour and a handful of seconds only. Is it enough to buy a last phone call with my beloved family? Could we bear it if it could? Memory plays tricks upon me, time is jeering, my words evaporated, nothing remains. Only your eyes smiling, your early morning scent, your touch upon my forehead. I will live with these, even in my death. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reminding us of the importance of time and things that are happening around the world, particularly on the fragility of life itself. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to, at this point, call on someone who's written a lot. She has written many books on the anti-apartheid struggle, and she is well known for writing a lot on the veterans of struggle. So I'd like to, again, just invite her. She had a disaster this morning, or almost had a disaster. Load shedding nearly made it impossible for her to be here. But we are happy that she was unload shedded and then she came. Professor Luli Kalinikos, thank you very much for coming.
This extract, the world that made Mandela will help to build up a portrait of Mandela as a whole person, a product of his society and his culture, as well as his own personal experiences. This is what I wanted to read, though. By beginning with Mandela's rural roots, this book reveals his grounding in the humanistic legacy of Africa. And here I'm remembering, too, that Chief Luthuli, the first black African, if you like, to get the Nobel Peace Prize, in his speech, in his acceptance speech, he said, "I believe Africa has something to teach the world." And I think that has been rather underplayed in all that generation of leaders, that there is this fundamental grounding in respect for other people, and an attempt to try and understand the way, of course, Madiba, just like startled the world when he said, but P.W. Botha, this monster, yet he's a human being. There must be a way in which we can get through to him. Of course, a year after his death, there is another narrative, another perspective, and that's important, and it's been emphasized. And that is a critique of reconciliation. People are saying, well, that's very beautiful, but it came at the cost of redress. We still have a deeply unequal society. And so there is this conversation or this debate between reconciliation and social justice. And perhaps the reconciliation, it looks like the former oppressors, and this was a racial apartheid was completely racial. The former oppressors, whether actively or passively, the whites, were too quick to say, well, that's all right then, we can carry on as we were before, but being nice to everybody, and that didn't address the fundamental system, the structures of inequality. And so I always believe we've got political democracy, but economic democracy has still a long way to go. So, but sorry, I meant to read something from here. I think I don't want to talk too long, but this is a heritage trail where I chose places which were meaningful in Madiba's life, sites of significance. And the idea was to encourage people to follow a heritage trail, which of course begins in the Eastern Cape and begins long before he was born, because we've got photos of those kings who resisted the dispossession of land and were sent to Robben Island. And then, of course, we've got, as I said, his rural roots, but then we also have his missionary education. And that generation, others, Tambo, Anton Lembede, Mda, the father of the novelist, they all had that kind of input of a Western education. And it's also very interesting how Mandela got together with Tambo and they decided we will use these weapons, this knowledge as a weapon against the ruling class to free our people, to defend, literally to defend their people when they became lawyers, fighting against the unjust laws of apartheid. And so throughout the book, you know, there's pictures of places, Kliptown, Freedom Square, you know, the synagogue in Pretoria where the treason trial took place, and many other places. And it ends with a quote from his autobiography. So in other words, the quote is quite a while ago, 20 years ago, in fact, because his autobiography, the biography of his own life by himself, was only published, was published as early as 1994. So there's 19 years still to go in his life, which is not recorded. So he ends with a photo of him walking in Kunu on a misty day. I like that photo because you can't always see exactly what the future, what the scene is ahead of you because of the mist. And he says, I have walked that long road to freedom. And of course the poem also said, it's a long way to go. So I was thinking, yes, a long road to freedom. So it's the long, but you know, there is the result. Not that the result is an end result. We've got freedom and yet we still have a long way to go. I've tried not to falter. I've made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. And I think this is just so relevant, this what he's saying here. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me. And of course, Kunu has a beautiful landscape. To look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended. And subsequent to that, of course, when Madiba retired, and of course, he hadn't quite retired. Remember later he said, I'm retiring from retirement. And he was no longer president, and I'm remembering that scene. I mean, not that I was there, but that scene that our journalists and our media have recreated for us, where he walked, he was in the NEC, he was like an honorary member of the NEC, and he raised the issue of HIV and AIDS. And he was ruled out of order, and he just walked out, but he had made that point. And he had admitted that he hadn't grasped, when he was president, the enormity of what was facing them. So he continued in his way, but he also realized that the democratic process was taking place, and he was once again, his voice was just one of many. And that's also fine. He contributed to that. And then when he actually retired, he had the program, as Berita showed us. It's in your hands, he said. I've done my bit. I've spoken about what I think is the way. It's now in your hands. And I think that's the message now. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks very much. I'm very, I'm thrilled to be part of this community of creative people and artists.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Ernest Koza to come and render a poem.
I'm going to read from this book. It's entitled Beautiful Fools. Don't mistake it for Professor Ndebele's Fools. Professor Ndebele's Fools are very ugly. These ones are very beautiful. The title of the poem is Do You Remember Me, Comrade? And it's going to be a detour from the current thrust of things from the speeches and poems that we received earlier on. Do you remember me, comrade? It's almost 2 decades since I've been with you. Now and then I see you on television. I often hear about you on radio. The other day, I hoped to shake your hand, but your motorcade was at a breakneck speed. I do not know if you saw me by that road. I doubt if you would in that ensuing cloud of dust. The window of your vehicle looked dark and thick. I came to the hall where you made a speech to business people. You looked majestic in your dark blue suit and white shirt. I did not get close enough to observe your tie. Then I will have whispered a few things to you. No doubt it will have induced some laughter from you. It will break the mold of the earnestness worn in your face. I will remind you of how we used to be inspired by Castro's attire. By the way, did you name one of your children Gaddafi? I thought I would still see you thereafter. I had a VIP card in my hand. I was advised I could not come close to you, for I needed a VVIP invitation card. I did reach the doorsteps of your area. You may not have seen me wave at you. Your sunglasses are dark and thick. I will have induced laughter and some reflection too. There was whiskey on your table, not the munkoyo we used to drink in Zambia. When we were accused of drunkenness, when an angry honey came to investigate, and he was given a non-alcoholic version of the same. He warned our detractors to reflect lest they throw empty accusations. How to the amusement of Chimuga, we bursted in laughter when he had left. By the way, what happened to Chimuga, Gaddafi's mother? Comrade Solomon says you have a new wife. I'm sure if I was close to me, you will warn me if that is an upgrade. Your walls are high and your gates are imperial. Your deep, long, and wide pool, bright tennis court lights. Your workers say they've never seen you swim. Do they know you swam across the Mohokare River? How we drank water out of thirst and not for the camera. How angry we were before exile, how the police bullet hit Comrade Sipo at the University Library of all places. When we dug tear gas and rubber bullets on our way to the campus clinic. How he died before we reached the clinic, and how we vowed to avenge his death. We had courage to plan how we can survive police raids. When you put on Mohali's dress and wig, a lingerie in your bag in case they doubted your gender. How we were caught out nevertheless, how out of torture you showed them where I was hiding. How the police booth removed your tooth much quicker than the dentist. Those months in solitary confinement, when the only sound was a squeaking plate, when we missed darkness, cockroaches, a welcome company. Sitting on a toilet pit was entertainment. Flushing a toilet, music. We missed the long debates on campus when we spent hours defining the people. And after so much references and quotes, we agreed the people are the poor, the weak, the oppressed. We vowed to defend the people and will also be by them all the time. And so, my comrade, I'm amazed everything around you is huge. Your house is wide on the surface and is high in the sky. Your walls are thick, wide, and high. Your black car is long, wide, and high. You are affirmed. The button of your blazer is under pressure. How I wish I could get closer to you. I will show you my scar. That bullet from Ian Smith's soldiers is still in my flesh. I guess I should become a VVIP to see you. Remember we're vegetarians and that it was not out of choice? Why will you only come to the village in the election season? Comrade, what is it that you fear about me? Why wouldn't you allow me to come to your office? Are you afraid that I'm going to talk about the people? The same people that we agreed will topple empires. Comrade, do you know that I've now become the people? Comrade, thank you.
I'd like to, at this point, call on a friend, a good friend of this place, and someone with whom I worked pretty closely, and now he's making more money outside, Frank Menkes, who is a good friend.
During the week that Nelson Mandela died, death lost its sting. A small yellow bird came each morning to knock with its beak against my window pane. Early, gently, like drizzle, like sunset, like green of a hill, like touch of an open hand, soft as new skin over a wound, gentle as the sound of the kora, vibrating in the ear. During the week that soul left body, it rained extensively, intensively, convincingly. Soggy fields, waterlogged lawns, drenched thatch, muddy ponds. Urban bodies and long walkers to rural stores cooled down. The sky's flat canopy painted ash gray. I think to myself, we let them go. A part of them go, a part of us go. There was a time, there was a phase, a novel rich in idiom, culture, and a place, a lilting story, a tugging of the ordinary, a song from deep within the soul, a sweeping gaze across so many oceans and so many hills. I let go, but I hold on. Over the Mbashe River, animals between grazing stand still for long periods looking across. In pleats of their clothing, the chiefs and indunas carry the dust from the nearby villages, and in their brow lines the stories that go back a long way. The rain, a gift from those who went before, a small parcel for us, for those who remain, a gift from Hinsa, Makana, the first of the first. The rain is for the farmers, for the fighters that died, for those who have shed hope, and those who blow on waning coals. On the plains of this heart, momentarily, there is abundance. There is favor, there is grace, and there are fingers that write deep tracks in my sand.
I'd like to call on one of the writers in this country, a journalist of note. She stands tall as a good journalist. She's so good that most of the time I'll try avoid say something, and when Maureen Isaacson calls me, I will find myself having said what I didn't want to say. I'd like to call Maureen Isaacson.
There's absolutely nothing new under the sun to say about Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. So I went back to Wally Soyinka's poem, "Your bounty threatens me, Mandela. that taut drumskin of your heart on which our millions dance. I fear we latch fat leeches on your veins. Our daily imprecations dull keen edges of your will. Compromises deplete your act's repletion, feeding will-voided stomachs of a continent. What will be left of you, Mandela? So I went back to the essays and the poems and the declarations and the recalibrations as we once again battle towards finding a way to a new social compact, because it seems the first one is not yielding what was expected. And whenever I was looking for an angle and I would phone Porcello or people at the foundation, I'd be sent back to the speeches. In 1961, in his trial, Mandela was to reveal to the court that growing up in Kunu, he would hear the seeds of democratic revolution in the stories of pre-colonial societies told by the elders. He was an African patriot, he said. On September 21, 1953, as president of the ANC Transvaal Congress, Mandela revealed himself as an internationalist who looked both west and east for inspiration. A revolution is maturing, he said, calling for militant trade union action. He was among those banned and gagged for openly condemning the criminal attacks by the imperialists against the people of Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Tunisia and Tanganyika, and for speaking out against attacks on the people of Korea and Kenya. You can see there's no easy walk to freedom anywhere, and many of us will have to pass through the valley of the shadow of death again and again before we reach the mountain tops of our desires, he said. I'd forgotten about that. I was hoping that it would come up in Luli's conversations. I was saying it to myself. In 1961, he explained in a press statement why he would continue his political work underground, as advised by the National Action Council, for which he was the spokesperson. I'm informed that a warrant for my arrest has been issued. I've had to separate myself from my dear wife and children, from my mother and sisters, to live as an outlaw in my own land. I will not leave South Africa, nor will I surrender. The struggle is my life. I will continue fighting for freedom until the end of my days. What did that really mean? When he was revisiting Robben Island, talking to Richard Stengel, who assisted the Time Time magazine editor, who assisted with the writing of Long Walk to Freedom, he said, I spent a terrible time without sharing my pain with anybody. In a letter, he also said to Richard Stengel, well, it would be an exaggeration to say I never became depressed. Many people, of course, would not discover that. And in a letter to Winnie Mandela, which I found in Fatima Meer's Higher Than Hope, Roli Klakla, We Love You, he said, my dreams tell the same story and keep on reminding me that I can't break away from the spell in which I was caught 22 years ago. The other night, both Zeni and Zinzi dragged me to a second-hand shop in Elof Street, between Commissioner and Main Street, to get some household furniture that we badly needed. When I woke on the morning of the 25th of the 2nd, it was 1976, he wrote, I was missing you and the children a great deal, as always. And then he wrote in 1980, I don't know how to interpret these dreams, but they at least indicate that there is far less steel in me than I had thought, that distance and 2 decades of separation have not strengthened the steel in me and have deepened my anxiety over the family. I didn't have any real personal conversations with Nelson Mandela, but I had a deep conversation with him in my head always, and in his book, through his book, Conversations with Myself. He loved the music of Tracy Chapman and the Manhattan Brothers. He learned how to use a gun in Ouija, Morocco. He met the Emperor Haile Selassie in Ethiopia in the 1960s. He told Ruth First to go to hell after a row about a case he had lost. Then they kissed and made up soon after. He mourned the loss of a sister in arms when she was assassinated by the apartheid regime in 1962. He said, I didn't want to be presented in a way that omits the dark spots in my life. He described the way when he was writing Long Walk to Freedom, he was prevented from correcting the distortions that had been propagated by his first wife, Evelyn Mase, because Walter Sisulu and others said, you are not only telling your life, we want you to be our model, around which we are going to build our organization. But the conversations recorded became really spicy. He enters the global stage. He tells Richard Stengel, Queen Elizabeth is a fine lady. Graça Machel, on the first meeting, is a very impressive woman and a striking personality. Fidel Castro is a striking chap. He's also very humble. And so is the Pope. Gee whiz, the Pope is also an outstanding person, he said. But he complained a bit. He said, my installation as the country's first democratically elected president was imposed on me much against my advice. At 76, he wanted to serve without holding any position in the organization or government. The liberation of the country gave meaning to his life, okay? But when you read these conversations, you go back again into the pain that I began with. A tree was chopped down, Zinzi's poem, moved him terribly. It tells of his the separation of her family from her father. He mourned his beloved mother in 1968, and he grieved for his son, Tembekile, who died in a motor accident in 69 at the age of 24. Thanks. He was devastated that he was not allowed to bury them at their respective funerals. He wrote, my heart bled when I realized I could not be present at the graveside. In 1969, he wrote that to Irene Mikwai in 1969. And then he said, I feel as if I've been soaked in gall. Every part of my flesh, bloodstream, bone and soul, so bitter am I to be completely powerless to help you in the rough ordeals that you are going through, he told Winnie in 1970. Such searing prose made it really difficult to resist sanctifying Mandela, even though he begged not to be sanctified. And he wrote that he worried deeply about the false image of sainthood that was cast over him. And he wrote, as the world's longest serving prisoner, I was never a saint, always a sinner who keeps on trying. Did he protest too much? I wondered, who but a saint would willingly clean a fellow prisoner's night bucket? A detail I found in the book. Memory was a savior, and it plays out in the last years of his incarceration. Reliving his epic life story, he hankers for that enchanting felt of his childhood. And he remembers being a rabble-rouser, caught up in revolutionary fervor, a townsman, a lawyer, a man of courage, which he downplays. But still, he notes that he made no striking errors of moral judgments. In conversations, I met a fastidious man who made notes on the prices of objects that filled his shrunken little world, from Nescafe to Frey Bentos, and of everything from newspaper reports of Winnie Mandela's gagging to the healing power of primrose oil. Mandela tells Kathy Kathrada that, contrary to news reports, I condemned unreservedly Winnie's April 1986 necklace speech, which endorsed the burning of alleged police informers and called for comrades to liberate the country with our boxes of matches and our necklaces. And his diary entry in 1986, August 20, reveals very interestingly that he tuned into Reverend Peter Story's broadcast sermon on forgiveness. He noted sermons on other matters ecclesiastical. And interestingly too, in an earlier letter to his daughter Maki Mandela in 1977, he recalls his baptism in the Methodist Church. He says, I have my own beliefs. It is far better to keep religious beliefs to yourself. You may unconsciously offend a lot of people by trying to sell them ideas that they regard as unscientific and pure fiction. But it's not really the other people's offense he's worried about, is it? He writes, leaders are divided into two categories: the inconsistent, whose actions cannot be predicted, who agree today on a matter and repudiate it the following day, and the consistent, who have a sense of humor and a vision. And when we're talking about Mandela, and everybody's raising little bits and pieces and saying how difficult it is to pin him down, and how there are now dialogues about redress and reconciliation, I think also about the way Wale Soyinka talked about him as a symbol of dialogue, the way he brought so many different cultures together and so many ideas, and how this dialogue continues. And I think about the way he tells Stengel that his statement from prison that nationalization was still ANC policy set off a furious reaction from South African business. American businessmen put pressure on us to reconsider the question of nationalization. And the decisive moment, he says, came at the World Economic Forum in Davos. I realized if we wanted investment, we would have to review nationalization without removing it altogether from our policy. He'd come a long way from the man who Luli mentioned was among the founders of the ANC Youth League in '94 with Anton Lembede and APM Da. Is it the right date? I see 44, sorry, it says that here. And who was tasked with setting up Umkhonto weSizwe. He had gone into the ANC with open eyes. An early diary entry noted, the presence in one organization of various classes and social groups without conflicting logic, long-term interests that may collide at crucial moments brings its own train of conflicts. I can still hear his voice. Thank you.
I'd like to, at this point, invite another poet, Maesha Jenkins, to come and recite her poem.
At sea, the lighthouse has gone out. Our small boats afloat in the darkness, confusing manatees with mermaids, pulled out by the song of the sirens, but there is only silence. We have forgotten to look to the heavens, no longer able to read the stars. We have forgotten our way home. Searching for the brightness of the shore, slowly we find each other, bobbing up and down, cold and wet, finding our direction and gaining our freedom once again as the brightness glows from our many radiant souls. Turning the boats around, we start to row.
Now call on a poet, musician, and playwright who is going to also render a piece, Eugene Skief.
Firstly, I'd like to take a moment to express my gratitude for my presence here, first of all at home. I'm indebted, firstly, to my comrades who are present here today, Pitiga Ntuli and Andries Oliphant, both of whom are part of a litany of characters in my life who contributed to my development and to me becoming who I am. Secondly, I'd like to very humbly thank my beautiful brother, Rax, for graciously inviting me to make a small contribution in participating here. And this morning, very early this morning, I received a text message on my local number from my brother Rax, reminding me of the invitation for me to participate here, by which time, because of my busyness, I hadn't yet prepared a poem to honor our great leader Madiba on this auspicious occasion, the first anniversary of his passing. But no sooner had I retrieved the text message than there was an outpouring of a poem unedited from my spirit. And as I was going to my laptop, which I'm holding now, to write it, my sister Gloria, who just arrived now, was bringing me breakfast in bed. And I risked being rude to her. She's my beautiful sister who's been looking after me, for as long as I can remember, by saying, no, thank you, not now. And I wrote the poem. That's the second of two very little poems I'd like to read. The first poem came about one day when Madiba was in hospital, and floral tributes were coming from the entire globe in his honor. I was with my 7-year-old daughter holding her in my right hand, and in my left hand was her best friend, also 7, but who came from a family who had not cultivated her in the education and knowledge of our great leader. And as we passed the beautiful bust of Madiba on the concourse of South Bank Centre in London, there was a cage that had floral tributes inside it. The little girl innocently asked about the flowers, and the poem came straight out, and this is the poem. A flower for the people, for Nelson Mandela. A child walking by sees a flower growing steadfast through iron bars. She asks, why is that flower there? Because it is a symbol of undying love, the power to grow beyond the enclosure and reach the sun, to ignite a fire in the hearts of one and all. Libation for Madiba. The stain on the rock bears the memories of the spillage from the tipping point of your overflowing love. It is in the shape of an evaporated subcontinent to which we should all migrate and prepare our dance to welcome the rains that will follow from the clouds swollen with the ripened promise of your risen spirit. Those of us with radiographic eyes peer into the empty cup of desiccated dreams and see in the darkness of its eternal bottom the shavings of your wisdom like a hieroglyph of truth. We read and return to the waiting choirs to sing your name in verses now inscribed in the resin of our own blood.
I'd like to now call on someone whose name was mentioned earlier on, Dr. Andries Oliphant.
One thing that is important in connection with that is that he had inspired legions of poets all over the world, on the African continent, in Asia, in the Americas and the Caribbean. And in 2006, Morakabi Siakwa, and I see he's here, he had been out of the country for a long time, Richard Bartlett. They put together a collection of these poems that appeared since the 1960s. And I want to read a poem which I published in the 1980s, early 1980s, at a time when the resistance in South Africa among the people intensified, and globally the support for the South African struggle and the release for Mandela reached a peak as we entered the final last decade of the struggle. It is called To Mandela. In a cell, girdled by a sea leaping and crushing against stone walls, spraying cold, burned water through the steel bars where you keep your vigil. A shower of water and fire over your head and shoulders, over your chest, hips and legs, tall and indestructible, sculpted from the soil of a continent, fired in flames with spherical clay pots, arrow tips and blades, proofed in furnaces of a puissant proletariat, and immersed to cool in rivers and the sea. Yes, in you a miraculous mingling of water and fire. Your spirit is a seagull soaring high above the penal island, saturated with the blood of lepers and the presence of courageous ones. You comprehend the instincts of the last surviving seals, mating on the apron of the island, soaked in sand. With a shoal of silver and blackfish, you dive to the seabed, where the last faint rays of the sun penetrate and illuminate the noble face of Makana, who burst into the surf with a plangent cry of freedom on his lips. On clear days, the rugged profile of the coast and the distant peaks of the vast circumference of the restless hinterland are visible. You are on the minds of everyone. In the waves you decipher the messages from the struggle you inspired. At night, like distant fires, the stars trace the outline and inner core of your face, defining the distance between you and the universe in a gesture, pure and irreducible, a clenched fist or a handshake. Then the water carried you manacled and guarded by captors lost in hatred. And in the smoke above the burning peninsula, you see a lifetime, a fleeting moment, persistent and eternal. Thank you.
I'd like to, now we're getting close to the end of the program, and I have two more before we end off. We've got Pumi Twala, who is a praise singer, whom I'd like to invite to come and do her piece.
Simela siphume mzansa wena uyabaleka uyeye kulezo ntaba simela siphume mzansi Afrika. Mangisho kanjalo ngizongena ngeculo ngoba utata umuntu womusic, umuntu wepoetry, umuntu yazoyo yonke into nje kimi. Mangisho kanjalo I'm a praise singer imbongi ngesixhosa. Actually I'm a Xhosa prophetess. Ngizoqala kanje. Kunothixo omkhulu usemazulwini, kunothixo omkhulu ikhakha lenyaniso, kusenguye nanamhla usemazulwini, kusenguye nanamhla ikhakha lenyaniso, kunothixo omkhulu usemazulwini, kunothixo omkhulu ikhakha lenyaniso, kusenguye nanamhla usemazulwini, kusenguye nanamhla ikhakha lenyaniso. Ndibiza uThixo umdali uhambile uTata Mandela, ndibiza izinyanya nabavikeli beAfrika, uhambile uTata wedemocracy, kwanesililo eKapa naseQunu, kwamangalwa eOrlando West naseSoweto, kwabuzwa eHoughton naseSandton, kwathandazwa ihlabathi lonke. Uhambile uTata Mandela, the great father of democracy, the great gift from the creator, the great man of reason, the great man of vision, the great hero in our lives. The great father of freedom who broke down the barriers of injustice and division in South Africa. The great father of freedom who broke down the barriers of injustice and division in South Africa. Uhambile uTata Mandela. Siyabulela Tata Mandela, wasebenza kanzima rholihlahla, the treason trial, the Rivonia trial, the accusations of high treason. Truly, you are a great man of reason. Truly, you are the great man of reason. Uhambile uTata Mandela. Ndibiza uThixo omdali, uhambile uTata Mandela. Ndibiza izinyanya nabavikeli beAfrika, uhambile uTata wedemocracy, kwanesililo eKapa naseQunu, kwamangalwa eOrlando West naseSoweto, kwabuzwa eHoughton naseSandton, kwathandazwa ihlabathi lonke. Siyabulela Tata Mandela, wasebenza kanzima rholihlahla. Siyabulela Tata Mandela, wasebenza kanzima rholihlahla. Ndibiza izinyanya nabavikeli beAfrika, kwathandazwa, kwabuzwa, kwamongalwa yehambyo.
Let me get to the someone who is very special in the audience also. Someone who is a former child soldier from the DRC, who also wants to give a piece in honor of Madiba, Leonardo Mulaja.
It is a tremendous pleasure for me to be here, and I was asked by Brother Rex to do something. Okay. The title of this poetry is called The Drunk Vampire. Okay. Thank you. Settle. Okay. It stems from the day Nelson Mandela died, and I blame it on to wine. I took too much wine that night after my favorite team, Chelsea, lost. And when I woke up, I thought I was dreaming. And when I changed the channel, I could see President Zuma announcing the death of Mandela. So I titled this book, this poem, Drunk Vampire. I stood motionless, speechless, and jigsawed as an Egyptian sphinx whose larynx exists no. At the bashing and crushing news of your death, Nelson Mandela is no more. Nelson Mandela is gone to rest with his forefathers. Our beloved son, your beloved one, Africa, is no more. Yet I refuse to accept the news, hence sweeping at different channels from sport to cooking ones. The whole world stood calm. Everyone from FIFA to even the Capetonian gangsters in Philippi, Langa, Kukuletu, Fishhook, Michel Plains, as the furthest corners of Deep Sloot and Orange Farm, as you lived and reminiscing your ever-present smile, overflowing from Monrovia in Liberia, Freetown, Sierra Leone, Lagos in Nigeria, Bamako in Mali, and as far as the most complicated country in the world, the DRC, my land, wherein our tremendous wealth has brought upon us perpetual curses, with women and young girls becoming war sex weapons at the expense of useless UN resolutions after resolutions. Assuredly, we shall not rest. Should I say I shall not rest until these inhumane warlords are brought to books. You have set your standard too high, Nelson Mandela, for leaders to fathom. Too high is your ethical legacy, which has no mercy on our visionless leaders of today. We shall not rest until we carry higher your universally moral flag all over the world. I will turn myself as a merciless vampire, flying higher in all directions, hunting after everyone who does not heed and respect your legacy. Yes, Dalibunga, I will be a merciless vampire. Yes, I will be a merciless vampire, hunting and rolling after them all. For you, for your love, Mandela, for your love, Madiba. Yes, Amandla Roiklata. Long live Mandela. Thank you very much.